Good afternoon, everybody. This is Scott Palmer, Executive Officer of the Builders and Remodelers Association of Greater Boston. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Just so you know, this is going to be recorded, and we'll be able to provide a link if you'd like to be able to see it again or share it. The course is worth 2 continued education units. To those of you who applied for that option, you are able to let me know that if you'd like to get that option. We'll make arrangements that you can get those credits. Immediately after the presentation, I'll send everyone who did apply for credits a brief survey, just a confirmation survey that you have attended this event today, and that'll probably make the BBRS happy with that renewal, because this will count as face-to-face credits with them, which is a good thing. We're going to have everybody mute their phones. We'll control that. If you do have a question, we will be monitoring the chat, but also after the call, we'll see hands that are raised through either if you're on the video, or you can do that through the Zoom device. We'll get around to opening lines up and responding to questions. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Bob Ernst, who's president of FBN Construction, and I am going to turn it over to Mr. Ernst now.
Great, let's see. Hi, everybody. I am going to try to share my screen. When I think Scott may have to let me. You may have to unshare your screen, Scott, so that I can. All right, there we go. Oh, I can see a whole lot more of you now, too. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see, share screen, and it'll be that one right there. Share from the beginning. All right. There we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome. As Scott said, this is a class that Builders Association is offering for free. Although if you want CEU credits, you can reach out to Scott. If you had signed up for CEU credits, that'll automatically happen. If you change your mind and you want to get the 2 CEU credits for listening to this, you can reach out to Scott a little later, and he can take care of that for you. So my name is Bob Ernst. I've been in business since 1986. This picture was a little before that. I put this picture up. I want you all to see. I've been doing this. I started as a laborer, framing carpenter, up to finished carpenter, lead carpenter, and worked my way up. So I understand what those of you who are you know, earlier in your careers than I am. I understand what you're going through. I really have lived your life. But the big difference is probably we used to wear tool bags back then. I don't think I see a lot of tool bags out there anymore. But anyway, my designations here, I'll just mention quick. CGR is Certified Graduate Remodeler. CAPS is Certified Aging in Place Specialist. And CGP is Certified Green Professional. Just a nod to the Builders Association. They've been a big part of my career development, and I recommend you look into continuing education at every opportunity through the National Association, which you can find out about through your local. So reach out when you're inclined to do so. All right, real quick, if you have any issues or questions, use the chat button, which in most cases is at the bottom of your screen. If you type on chat, it'll give you an opportunity to type in a message. It'll be received by Scott, and he'll get that message to me one way or the other. One of my vice presidents, Larissa Cook, who's responsible for a lot of helping me through this, is here, and maybe Scott can text her if there's something I need to address right away. Otherwise, we'll talk about those when we get done. But again, if you have any specific questions or issues, send them out. One thing I'm not able to do here is see many of you and see reactions, whether I've lost you, whether I've bored you, whether I've thrilled you. So I just have to go on faith here. But if there's any need to reach out, go ahead and give it a try. Okay, an overview quick about what we're going to talk about today. What is project management? We're just going to get a definition, talk about that briefly. Who does project management? You know, every company's a little different. We'll talk about that. Ego, how does ego play into project management? We're going to get into the details of scheduling, budgeting and cost controls, communications, and safety is on here because I wanted to mention it. We're not actually going to talk about safety today, although it's a very important part of every construction project. And it doesn't matter if you're project manager or laborer or carpenter, it's something that needs to be paid attention to. We're not going to get into that today. We're also not going to talk about COVID-19 specific details today. When we get done, if time allows and you have any specific questions about COVID-19 and how that's affecting project management, by all means, put that question in there, and if we have enough time, we'll talk about it. Okay, definition of project management. I found this one, and it was very short and sweet. It said, project management is the organization of a project and its components. Simple, straightforward. I think that's pretty clear. The one thing that I don't think is included in here, which I think it should, which I would add to that, is organization of a project and its components to a successful completion, right? I mean, it's important to recognize that your job isn't just to get it done, but to complete it in a successful way. And there's many ways to measure that, whether it be profit, whether it be customer satisfaction, whether it be strong relationships with your partners at the end. So it's really important that all the decisions you make and all the energy you put into project management is towards this successful completion end. What makes up project management? Planning, first and foremost. I think so many times, and I can speak to this from personal experience, as I mentioned, I'd start a project, I'd have a plan, I'd show up on day one, and I'd probably schedule the demo guys, or was going to do it by myself, but it was kind of seat of the pants. So it's all right, we're going to do we'll do the demo and then we'll move on. I didn't put a lot of planning into it. And honestly, that makes a huge difference. It's the most straightforward, simplest thing you can do is just agree to plan. Put together a plan before you start. And do it. And then managing your resources. It's project management is understanding what you need ahead of time. What subs are you going to need? What additional labor are you going to need for carpentry? What materials are you going to need? The resources and managing those is an important part of project management. The other part of project management is assessing and managing risk. It's an important part of your responsibility to both your company and your client. Being active in looking and assessing what the risks are as they develop throughout a project, and then doing what you can proactively and in camera when they happen to manage those risks. When does project management begin? It varies, right? We can look at when the lead comes in, when somebody calls, says they want to do their kitchen. I'd submit there's a project management component to receiving that lead, managing that lead, looking at the resources you need for that lead, assessing and managing the risks of either taking that lead on or not. Estimating, again, in and of itself, its own little project. And if you're an estimator for a company, or if that's part of your responsibility, you can put these same and apply these same principles to estimating. Project management is a term that's used throughout virtually every industry. I know software people that tell me about their project management, and managing, planning and assessing risk and managing your resources applies throughout, just as it applies to each of these tasks that follow through a project coming into your company through completion. Sales, again, and production, of course, as a project management component. Companies handle this in different ways. Some companies that I know, some very successful companies, will assign a point person from the time that lead comes in, and they'll be the project manager of that project from the day that project comes in the door, taking it through estimating and selling the project, working with their lead carpenter or site supervisor. They might have another project manager or assistant project manager working with them. All of this, whether it be a point person and all of those individuals or individually, this all adds up to a project management team. And as I've said in other talks and about other topics, there is a team, and you don't get to decide that you want to work on a team or you agree to work on a team. You're gonna be on that team. The real question is, what kind of a team member do you want to be? Do you want to be a productive, communicative, active team member, or are you just along for the ride and going to take credit? So if we start looking at what types of tools and how do you actually project manage, let's start at the beginning. And one story I like to share is, if you were building a car, your project management would start when they gave you the plans. The engineer maybe gave you a set of plans and they told you to get this car built. You would do a lot of work putting this together, assessing what you needed for equipment, what you needed for people on the line, the assembly line, how long it was going to take, putting together a schedule, and then you would implement that project, and your project management would largely be done, because from that point forward, it's automated. You know what that car is going to look like. Nobody's going to change it in the middle. Everybody understands their roles and responsibilities, and now it's on the assembly line. We all know that's not the way our projects go. One thing I want you all to understand is ego and how that plays into project management. Now, for me, ego is understanding people's expectations. Okay, this is primarily what's your client's expectations. You have to understand their ego. What is their expectation of this project? What are their goals of this project? The goal may be to finish by September. The goal may also be to have a big addition. The goal may be to have a fabulous kitchen. The goal may be to have an experience that is livable, that their kids need to be there and be able to use the kitchen. There may be accommodations. And what's their objectives? Why are they addressing this project now? They may have gone through a design process and ended up with a big family room with lots of windows and an open kitchen. But what was their objective? What did they want to achieve with that? They started off by saying, I want to be able to have my kids playing and me cooking and my wife coming home and having some work to do and sitting at the island. I wanted a family-oriented scenario. Or they could have said, I want a spa-like bathroom because I want a place, a respite, a place to get to once the kids are down that I can relax and enjoy. So other than just the goals of what it's going to end up looking like and when it's going to be done, understanding what their objectives are and why they're doing what they're doing can really help you as you go through this project and manage the project towards those expectations, those goals, and those objectives, the ego of the project. When it comes to expectations and understanding them, it's really good to ask questions. Their expectation is going to include the budget. Their expectation is, what's it going to cost me and how's that going to be handled? Their expectations include the schedule. How long is it going to take, and what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't take longer? Their lifestyle during the project. What are their expectations? Is it going to be dust-free, right? Or is it going to be, listen, we're in an old house, dust is going to get there. I understand you're going to do the best you can, but I'm okay. Be careful about the expectations you set, and manage those expectations throughout. When it comes to accommodations, what are you going to set up for them? In their mind, are they going to have a temporary kitchen? Are they going to be able to use a microwave and a coffee machine, or are they going to have more? Understand what those are from the beginning. That ties into their experience of this project, and what do they see it looking like. So a very important part about project management is understanding and asking the questions and getting a clear set of expectations. When it comes to goals, as we talked about, you can look at the plans. You can think about the completion. What does completion look like for them? And what's the outcome? Where is this going to end up? What do they want this to look like when it's done? That can be shared through drawings, renderings, conversations, communications. It's all about understanding. If you don't see what they see this being like at the end of the project, if you don't see what their outcome for success looks like, it's going to be hard for you to manage towards that. And finally, objectives, as we talked about. It really is about when are they going to say, oh my God, I'm so happy, I want to throw a party. What does that look like for them? Do they walk in and see it exactly the way they saw it in the plans? Do they walk in and sit down with their family the first weekend after you leave and they call you and say, oh my God, this is it. This is exactly why we set out upon this. It was expensive and it's disruptive, but boy, was it worth it. Let's throw a party. So think about that. You know, when would they say to you, I want to throw a party and celebrate because you knocked it out of the park? Know what that looks like, know what that feels like, and it's going to help you manage towards that objective. So now you understand the ego. You got to put together a plan, then you have to manage that plan, and you have to assess and mitigate the risks throughout the project. To plan is to schedule. And it's probably the thing that really is a conundrum to me, because most of the carpenters I've worked with over the years, including myself early on, if I was told to build an addition, I'd say, I need a plan. I need a plan. I don't know what I'm going to build unless you show me what I'm going to build or tell me what I'm going to build. In the same way, I don't know how you can actually attack a project and embark upon a project without putting together a schedule. Over the years, I've heard over and over again how fruitless it is to bother with a schedule because everything's going to change anyway. And how a waste of time it is to put too much time into a thoughtful schedule because everything's going to change anyway. And I would just say that it's really important to have a schedule to manage those expectations. Having a schedule, putting it down on paper, allows you to share that with your design partners, with your client, to say, this is my plan for meeting your expectations and your goals and your objectives. And I have a plan. You need to do what you need to do to fit into my plan. And if you don't make decisions, or if you change your mind, or if you set up roadblocks, whether it be you need your kitchen livened up for a week, that could affect our schedule. And this gives you the ability to manage that throughout the project. This is a picture of a Microsoft project schedule, which is a program we've been using here for 25 years, I think. It's a very effective, very useful scheduling program. It's very intuitive. We're not going to get into details about it, and there are other programs out there that do a great job. We like this one a lot, and among other things, what putting a schedule together thoughtfully and early allows you to do, and this particular picture doesn't show it, but you can create links to various tasks here that indicate what has to happen before another task. Therefore, as you move through your project and you manage that project and you manage your schedule, if you change one thing, all of the other dependencies will automatically change the other things for you. So putting enough thought into your preliminary schedule can really help you down the line. Okay, to plan, I agree. We need plans, we need specs, we need the scope. I don't know about you guys, but I think the number of times I get a full set of plans, all the spec, and a really solid scope that I feel comfortable is the final scope. It maybe occurs about 10% of the time. Maybe it's because of the type of custom construction we do. Maybe it's the marketplace we work in. But if you're fortunate enough to get a full set of plans, spec, or scope, if you're a builder and you have a model you're building, maybe it's a little easier. But it doesn't matter. You still, regardless of whether you get it all or not, once you agree you're going to start that project, you need to plan anyway. You need to put together a schedule anyway. So what I like to say is, when you go to begin to plan, don't get too hung up on what you don't know. If you don't know when the cabinets are going to come in, if you don't know when they're going to make a decision about the cabinets, so you don't know how long the cabinets are going to take. If you don't know if the tile is in stock or not, don't worry about it. Put together your first schedule that you're going to share with your team based on a logical progression of steps to get to where you need to be. And then you can review that with your team and identify the areas of, what needs to be decided when. You can add those into your schedule. During that conversation, when we had this conversation on a project not too long ago, where we produced a schedule and we sat down at the kickoff meeting, and it said the tile, we needed to start tile on May 8th. And the designer turned white and said, I haven't even ordered the tile yet, and the tile I'm looking at is 6 weeks out, and there's no way it's going to be the end with it. Great, no problem. We can adjust. We can either start later, or we can see if we can massage the schedule. But it creates that ability to manage the project, and that's what you're doing. You're project managing. You're not project watching. You're not project observing. You're project managing, and using these tools will help you do that. A template can be helpful. As you start to go through doing schedules, you can have templates that will help you get started with how to build that schedule, whether it be demo, framing, rough plumbing, rough electrical. Every job might have different things to add in, but having a template is a good way to start, and saving those and reusing those. For all of you out there who haven't done a lot of scheduling and don't think you know how to schedule, I want to tell you, if you know how to build, you know how to schedule. When you sit down and you look at a set of plans, in your mind, you're already scheduling. In your mind, you're putting those tasks. All right, I'm going to show up. I got to get the demo guys there. And after the demo, they're probably going to be a couple days. I'm going to make sure I've got another guy with me 3 days later. And you're doing it in your head anyway. If you just start writing those steps down, just start writing them in a vertical order. And then next to it, put a start date and a finish date of how long it's going to take. Then go to the next one. If that finishes on that date, when do I start? I'm just trying to get across. Don't get intimidated by either having to know everything to be able to schedule, or the other fear I think people often have is they're afraid to put a schedule down on paper, because then they'll be held to it and people will say, what were you thinking? And if you put the right thought and the right attention to it, you can back that up. Well, what I was thinking is you were actually going to order the tile on time. Or what I was thinking is you weren't going to change your mind, and that's why now I have to adjust the schedule. So again, use this schedule as a tool, just as you would use any other tool on a project if you're moving through. Build that schedule. If you know how to build, you know how to schedule. So just build that schedule. Start building it in your head. Use your crystal ball. If you don't have one, Amazon sells them. But use your crystal ball that you have in your head, and just see that project through from start to finish. It's going to go perfectly in your head. So that's the way it should look on paper. Well, what if you put your schedule together, your project manager, and then you talk to your salesperson or your boss or the client? You look at what the client's expectations were. What's in the contract? Oh my God, my schedule is a lot longer than it says. Who is wrong? Well, you don't know. So challenge your assumptions. Go back through your schedule. Where did you pad it? It's not unusual. Some people, when they put together schedules, they are very loath to make a mistake or to set an expectation they can't beat. So they'll put their first schedule together and it'll be padded. They'll put time in for framing that says, let's give ourselves a couple weeks. Well, If you look at your schedule and it's too long, look at it and challenge. Say, well, why was it 2 weeks? Well, two of us are going to do it. All right, well, what if you put 3 guys on? Would it go faster or slower? And that's an important thing to recognize when you're project managing. More people doesn't always mean less time. And it might mean less time. It might mean 3 guys can get it done in 7 days instead of 2 guys in 10 days. Well, that's 1 more man day of labor. It might cost a day longer, but you might want to look at that and even bring that to the team and bring that to your client and say, look, we could finish sooner, but it might add a day's worth of labor. You can have that conversation because you've thought through, you use that schedule as a tool to challenge your assumptions and challenge the expectations. What if your schedule comes up too short? Your contract says you're going to be there for 5 months and your schedule says 3.5 months. Have you been too aggressive? Have you not allowed for issues? Did you put in for building inspections just 2 days because you're going to get the plumbing and rough electricals on Monday and the building on Tuesday? Well, I don't know about you, but inspectors have not been that responsive of late, particularly downtown Boston. They're overwhelmed. We'll put in 5 days for inspections. You know, we have to allow for those things because they're likely to happen. And you should accommodate those. Don't be overly optimistic. And that can be another challenge for project managers or site supers when they're looking at their schedules. It's another area that I want to bring back to the team of project managers. If you are a project manager and you have a site super, you need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. That site super, that lead carpenter needs to understand how to schedule. And you as project manager need to make sure they do know. And if they don't know, work with them. Get them to understand how to read that schedule. Get them to understand how to look ahead at that schedule and project. Another tool that I've used in the past that can be helpful is what we call a stretch goal. And I actually got this from a client that was a consultant, an international business consultant. They use project management. And I remember talking with him about a schedule at one point that we put together a schedule. And I think I put together a schedule that team thought was pretty aggressive, and the team put together another schedule, and we presented both to the team, to the design team and the client, and we said, look, this is an aggressive schedule. This is if things go really well and everybody does what they need to do and people show up and we don't get bad weather, but this is the more realistic one. The other one's a kind of a fantasy. And he said to me, don't call it a fantasy, call it a stretch goal. Call it a stretch goal. If you use that term and you're working with business people, they'll know what that means, and they'll know that that means this is a stretch. And if we're all willing to stretch, if the client is willing to stretch their decision making to make things happen a little quicker, if they know that they need to put some pressure on their design partner to perform quicker, we can meet the stretch goal. Depending on the type of contract, that stretch goal could mean more profit for your company. It could mean lower cost for your client. And in general, it could just be a more satisfied team. So always try to produce that most realistic goal for a schedule, and also a stretch goal, which will give you a tool to look back to and say, are we tracking a stretch goal, or are we just pacing along and letting things happen? And by having that stretch goal, you can help the client when they are saying to you, why is it taking so long? Why aren't we, saving money? What can we do to save money? You can point to that stretch goal and show them their responsibility and their accountability. How are we doing time? Doing time good. We've got a lot of slides, guys. We're moving along a little quickly. Again, maybe write down any notes or questions you have. We'll get to those a little later. The other part about a schedule, I think that is really important, is to post the schedule. Have enough confidence to post your schedule. If your schedule is posted on a job site, large enough so that people can read it, you want your client to see that That's the way you manage. You're managing to a schedule. Things are under control. You want your subs to be able to look and see that, oh my God, these guys have a schedule. When I say I'm going to be there on Tuesday, I have to be there on Tuesday because it's written down. And it's going to be evident that I've agreed to that schedule. And if I'm not there, I've let them down. So, so posting the schedule is important. That's the first thing. Accurate is the next thing. It took me a long time, honestly, really long time to get my own team to work with schedules, post their schedule. I finally got them to put a schedule together, to post a schedule, and I would show up on jobs from time to time. And more often than not, I'd say, how are we doing on schedule? And they'd say, oh, we're doing fine. Yeah, I think we're doing okay. I think we're just about there. And I go, oh, okay. And I go and I look at the posted schedule, big, bold posted schedule, and it would say plaster complete for today. And I'd look and the blue board hadn't been hung yet. And I'd say, well, this says your plaster's complete. Oh, that schedule's, oh, we're not using that one anymore. We've already updated or told the client that's not accurate. And I think it's really important that whatever schedule is posted is the actual schedule. If a new schedule hasn't been printed and provided for you to post, or you haven't had the opportunity to do it, take down the old schedule or put a big X through it. But make sure you do that. Next is detailing the schedule. Other than posting it, having it accurate, and making sure everybody's aware of it, that Gantt chart is a Gantt chart schedule. It's based on weeks, and it's based on tasks of overall completion of framing overall. What we have applied here, and my team came up with this themselves after me beating them over the head for 10 years about actually doing a schedule. They finally realized they could even do a better job, and they've come up with a tool we use, which I'd like to recommend, which is a whiteboard. Each of our projects now has a whiteboard like this. And I don't know, you probably can't make it out too well, but each site super writes down on a calendar basis like this, February 2nd, February 3rd, February 4th, who's gonna be there each day and what that team each day is gonna look like. Many of my site supers, and frankly, I wish all, would do what Kevin has done here for me. And in the bottom left corner, I'm pointing at one of those dates, about the third line down, there's a little note there that says 2. What that indicates is, other than what's happening and who's going to be there, for us, it's how many in-house labor people or how many carpenters do we need on the site. Doesn't necessarily say how many plumbers or how many electricians. It'll say plumbing, it'll say electricians, but it'll tell us, it'll give us a good idea of looking forward how many carpenters we need to allot for that day. The project manager can look, go to our scheduler and say, I need 2 people for 5 days. It also is a good tool when you look at it this way. It's a good tool to look at how long the framing is actually going to take, or the finished carpenters. If I have 2 guys for 5 days, I expect to be done. You can add 5 times 2 and say 10 days. Look at the budget. How many carpenter man days did we have allowed? You're either able to then look at that and say that's not good because we only had 6 days allowed, or that's great, we had 14 days allowed, so let's try to keep it at that, and we'll be ahead of budget. But it's a good tool to use and to manage.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Excuse me. A question here. Does this data that you have on the board get transposed onto anything electronically, any kind of a tool?
Yes. So what we have implemented here as a strategy is this is on site, and our lead carpenters or site supers are required to take a picture of this and email it to the office. The office then saves it in their job folder. That's our process. And it's there for us to view. If you're a project manager working remotely, you can pull this up, you can have conversations about it. But this is an on-site tool. It's an on-site tool for the site super, for the plumbers, for the electricians, to observe. The other point I'd like to make is that just like any other tool, looking at it's not going to get anything done. You got the brand new cordless Sawzall with the right blade. Looking at it, it's not going to do anything. You've got to use it. And this tool, if it's just posted, then it's not going to do anything if you don't use it. And by use it, I mean, look at what you've put together for your 4 or 6 week or 8 week look ahead. After 2 days of finished carpentry, take a look. And if you said you had 5 days to finish carpentry and you're 2 days into it, assess, are you going to finish in 5 days? And if you're not, if you're going to need 2 more days, if a change happened or you came across some bunch of rot that you had to replace and this is going to extend out, go ahead then and extend the schedule out. Our team has come up with some great solutions. You can't make it out so well here, I don't think, but each of those weeks is actually a strip magnet. So they write on it with an erasable marker, but if they have to move things, they can slide those strip magnets down. They don't have to rewrite every time, but use it as a tool. And when something changes, change this whiteboard. If you need to do it every day, if you need to do it twice a week, if you need to do it at the end of the week, depending on when things change, it allows you to see what's happening, how are your projections meeting reality. And even if it's changing because of a change order or something that came about, you'll know and you can make these changes. You can look down and when you move those strips and when you move those names, you can call your electrician and say, I know I told you I need you next Wednesday. We ran into some problems. I'm not going to need you until the following Monday. If you can give them a week or 2 weeks notice of when things change, they're going to be held much more accountable to your schedule and showing up when you said you need them and when you told them you'd be ready. All right, enough about schedule. The other important piece is budget. And again, I think many people aren't focusing on budget enough. They just figure, listen, we've got a plan, we got a scope. My job is to get it done. The estimator, if they did a good job, it'll all work out. Obviously, that's not enough, especially these days. Everything costs so much money, you need to pay attention. So first and foremost, you need to understand the budget. There are a lot of different ways estimators put together budgets. There's a lot of various transparencies within companies about how much you get to see, how much you get to know. I would suggest that a project manager and a site super need to understand how these costs were put together and what the expectation of the company is on budget. The budget understanding is really the first and foremost. Besides just understanding how is it put together, what does it look like, it's analysis. It's looking at the schedule that's put together and analyzing it against the budget. How do they match up? Where do they match up? It's about reporting on the budget. It's about looking at, this is how much we thought it would cost to accomplish this. This is how much it has actually cost to accomplish this. Knowing those will help you make other decisions throughout the project. So it's not just about having the budget in your job folder. It's not just about knowing what the budget was. It's knowing what the budget is now. Again, lots of different ways: fixed price contracting, time and material, fixed fee. Doesn't matter what you're doing. There's an expectation in that ego of the project that the client has about what the budget is, and the company you're working for has an expectation. You need to understand those, and you need to use the budget as a tool to analyze and report on what's happening on your project. We do weekly reporting, weekly updates of the budget. This is where we thought we'd be at now. This is where we're at. This is what it costs to complete that much of this task, whether it be framing. This is how much we think it's going to cost to finish. Now that we're halfway through, we think we've used 60% of the budget. We think we're going to end up at 120%. Let's know that. Let's know why. Using that as a tool can help you say, why are we 20% over budget? Oh, there was something that happened. There was a change to the window opening and we had to reframe it. Using this as a tool and understanding the budget and that you're over can help prompt you for notifying and reporting that there's a change order that you need to bring to the attention of your client. So again, this helps you to give notice and to manage your client's expectations. Change orders. One of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I would suspect every one of you out there, I see a couple people popping up on my screen that I recognize that have been doing this as long or longer and are successful and more successful as me. And I think you would agree, one of the lessons we all learned early on is, yeah, change orders are fine and they happen and people acknowledge them and they know when there's a change and you talk about, that's gonna be a change, yeah, I get it. And then at some point, usually late in the project, you produce the change orders and the client is just flabbergasted that their $100,000 project is 160. And you can go down and you can remind them of all the times they added and changed, but you didn't update that throughout the project and you didn't report that in a timely way. You reported there was a change, you reported it might be $1,000 or the dreaded, oh, that's not a big deal. It's a change, but that worry's not a big deal. Well, a big deal to you might be a huge deal to somebody else. So it's really important as you go through and as you project manage that you report regularly any changes to their budget and how those changes might affect the schedule. Don't rely on, them recognizing they said, they understood, they told me they knew it was a change. I had an email that they said it was a change. If you don't keep them up to date, that's on you. It's part of your job is to manage, not just observe, but to manage and report. Another part of the budget process is understanding it, knowing it inside and out, and then creating buyout. And buyout is you get as a project manager, you're given an estimate, you're giving a budget and told to go complete this project. You now have to say, all right, so in the estimate, there was $10,000 for plumbing. There may have been a selected plumber at that point. You need to ask that question. What commitments may have already been made to certain trade subcontractors? What's your company's policy about how you handle buyout? Do you give the person who was the preliminary quote when you put together your estimate preference? Do you let them have another bite at the apple if you have to get previous or subsequent quotes to meet requirements of a client for buyout? Do you give them another bite at the apple? You've got to understand what are the commitments. You also want to know what the availability is. If the plumber estimated that project 2 months ago when you were looking at it and he gave you a price of $10,000 and you're doing the buyout, you go down to plumbing, you call them up and say, hey, we got you penciled in for this project. We're starting it in 2 weeks and we're gonna need you in a month. And he may say, hey, when I priced that, I was fine, now I'm booked. So you may have to, that buyout is important to do early and actively so you know what the availability is so you can then move on and get another plumber. Maybe 2 months ago, everybody was hungry and all of a sudden now everybody's busy and you might have a hard time getting somebody to, you might have a hard time buying that out for the price it was estimated if things have changed. So it's really important to attack this buyout early and get things set early as much as possible. Knowing what the scope is and what the scope isn't is really important. And that's very important in buyout because the scope when it was priced by the plumber may have been very vague. It may have been priced on preliminary plans because the client wanted to make a commitment and get you on board and the plans have developed and now you have a much better scope. You've got to get that out during the buyout to make sure that any reporting you need to do back to change in that pricing happens now, not when the plumber's there or not when the plumber shows up. So the buyout's very important to ask the questions about availability, make sure the scope that you currently know and that's currently in the budget is accurate to the current documents. And what are the agreements? What are the agreements you have as it relates to change orders with your subs, as it relates to scope? Do they know that, listen, the scope you have and the budget you gave me, you need to match that up against the current scope and make me aware. You need to have an agreement that they are going to, as part of the buyout, that they are agreeing to the current scope, not the previous scope. Get that understood. And the agreements you have with your client and with your design partners about buyout. Our buyout at this point is for a generic plumbing scope. We don't know what the fixtures are. We don't know how many shower heads. You're going back and forth. Have that agreement and have it clear to everybody in writing that the scope is an allowance or the scope is a qualified allowance. But just make sure everybody's on the same page. Again, as project manager, that's your job. You are the director here. Okay, the other important part besides planning is assessing and mitigating risk. Obviously, as we talked about very early, and we're not going to talk in detail about, safety is a very important risk, and everybody involved in the project has to be responsible for safety. And as project manager, you need to assess what's going on, you need to see it, you need to visit your sites, and if you see something, you need to mitigate it, make it safe. Okay, who's responsible for project management? Who's accountable for project management? And I like to say the entire team. You might be called the project manager, but as we've talked about, your site super has to help you. Your carpenters have to help you. They have to be able to give you feedback, but you're all responsible. And this is on your end. And this is ultimately, you may have that title, but you need to use your team and use them well. They can help you to assess and mitigate risk. You may not be and likely won't be on site all day, every day. So you have eyes, you have ears out there, and they need to understand how the whole team's responsibility is to assessing and mitigating risk. When it comes to assessing and mitigating risk, I have another acronym, PAC, and that's project. That means look forward, look ahead. Don't just be caught up in what's going on today. You need to assess risk, you need to see what's coming, not what happened. You don't want to have these things happen to you and be surprised any more than is absolutely necessary. So constantly be projecting, be looking ahead, be looking a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ahead to make sure that your plan makes sense, to make sure that what you said is going to happen 2 weeks from now, the things that have to happen now to allow that to happen are in process. So an important way to assess and mitigate risk is to look into your crystal ball again. Look at what's going to happen and see the types of things that might happen. Anticipate. Again, think about the things that have happened to you in the past. Are they likely to happen? Do you see signs that are going to lead you in that direction? We've all heard the definition of crazy, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So anticipate and try to avoid those common mistakes. The other part, PAC, project, anticipate, communicate. When you project and you see something that you think could happen, and you've anticipated a particular problem, communicate that. Communicate that to your team. Reach out to your site super, reach out to your carpenters, get them together and say, guys, I see something coming. I want you to be aware of it. Let's all work to try to prevent this problem from happening. Let's elicit support from our extended team, our design partners, our client, our trade subcontractors. Look this through, manage this problem, assess and mitigate the risk by looking forward. Project, anticipate, and then communicate that to all of the stakeholders. All the stakeholders in your project should be aware of any risk that you project and you anticipate. And when you project the progress and you anticipate or recognize issues, you're going to be heading in the right direction. When you communicate them, you can get support from everybody, and you can know you have a team working to help eliminate those potential risks. Now, how do you communicate? Meetings, obviously, is a big way. Emails, phone calls, sure, but you can't substitute for meetings. And when it comes to meetings, there are two types. There are internal meetings, in-house meetings, where you might want to work with your team before you have a entire team meeting, where you talk about the things you're projecting, you're anticipating, you communicate about how you might handle some of these issues. Have that internal meeting to go over things, practice how you're going to deliver difficult messages. Talk about how each of you thinks a message might be received. I'm going to do a quick time check.
A little faster.
No, I got to pick it up, pace a little bit. Sorry, guys. All right, so communicate, have those internal meetings. There are often times in companies, and ours is one of them, where we do a handoff process. Typically, the person who sells the project isn't going to be the person project managing throughout. Sometimes it happens, but it doesn't always. So we have handoffs. It's really important to have a handoff meeting. You know, put enough time into it. I think we can generally, when I say we, I mean me, I can probably do a better job of preparing for that handoff meeting. Many on my team do a better job of that than I do. But the more time you put into preparing for these meetings, the more time you put into having these updated internal meetings, the better off you're going to be when you're communicating to your client. External meetings. They're a little different these days, I imagine, for most of us. This format is often a common theme, Zoom meetings, it can be very effective. Actually, in some ways, I've found they can be even more effective. People seem to be to the point a little more. It's a little hard to break out into separate meetings. Another important part about meetings is the agenda. And getting that together before the meeting. We communicate about the meetings and we put together an agenda for the meeting. This is our meeting. We're the project managers. Design partners often will want to take a lead role in this, but I like to say this is we're in charge of construction. This is our meeting. You can have a separate meeting. You can have a meeting after hours where you're running the show. But for right now, from a project management point of view, we're going to set the agenda. We're going to send it out ahead of time. And when we sit down, we're going to follow an agenda. In that agenda, we have certain recommendations that we have found that really work. When you send out the meeting agenda, I always recommend you talk about financials first. Any financial reporting, you get that done first. The reason being, when you all assemble and the designers there, the architects there, invariably the client pulls the architect over and starts talking about how much they love the way they put this window there, or, hey, you know, now that I'm looking at this, I might want to talk, and it ends up being a design meeting. And oftentimes the real important things you need to do as a project manager, update the financials, talk about the issues you need answers to so that you can move forward. Make sure that they're on the same page, that they're comfortable with the way things are going. Those get lost talking about the color of the tile and the grout and whether they think so. So put together an agenda, attack the most important things first, and tell them they're going to move on to the details afterwards. So I like to talk about the financials, update those, any outstanding issues that they need to know about that could affect the budget or schedule, and any collections. What's the agreement? Are they going to pay weekly? Are they going to pay monthly? Is this an invoice opportunity? Get that invoice to them then, before time runs out. And they don't get to say, oh, well, I wanted to talk to you about that invoice. I'm not sure I should give you a payment right now. Well, let's talk about it now. Because if you wait until the very end and you go, oh, here is your invoice, and they're already talking about grout colors and counter templates, you may lose the opportunity to have that conversation right then and there, and things might not move forward. Communicate about the meetings and take minutes. It's really important at those meetings that somebody is taking minutes. Documentation of those are really important. Any discussions in meetings should be documented and shared. And that's not just in that weekly meeting or bi-weekly meeting or whatever you do. If you have meetings with the client on site, you should write down and post those to a folder, share those with everybody. And if you're the site super and a client comes on and asks you to do something not in the scope and agrees that he wants you to move that window 6 inches and he knows it's going to be half a day of labor, jot it down, send out an email to the team, let everybody know in a very timely way. That should be part of your job report. Okay, successful completion. What does that look like? Okay, the job is done, right? That's what successful completion is. It's not the client has moved in. It's not, what do we say? It's appropriate for the intended use, right? It's usable in the way that it was intended to be used. Well, the kitchen's not done, but they can use it. That's not complete. Completion is commissioning. It's testing things. It's making sure things work. And commissioning is important. And when clients want to move in because they're just sick of it, or you want them to move in because you told them you'd be done by a certain date and you're not done, and there's plenty of reasons that aren't your fault, and maybe some that are, but you want to meet that schedule of them moving in. You need to be aware and you need to communicate that you want them to move in, you want to give them that opportunity to use their kitchen because they're sick of it, but these are the risks inherent with them moving in. You may not be able to test everything appropriately. It's gonna take longer to ultimately finish because they're using the space. The ability for you to commission, to go through that project, to look for problems and solve those problems before they move in is going to be jeopardized. So make sure that's clear. Make sure that's written down in meeting minutes that they are accepting some risk moving in. Things won't be done. Things will take longer. They're going to be frustrated. They're going to get sick of you. All that happens. We all know it. And let's go. The other thing is closeout, not punch out. I don't like the word punch list. Somebody once referred to punch list to me early in my career as a punch list are all the things that were a pain in the ass to do and didn't have to be done at that very moment, so you put them off. And a punch list is an accumulation of a bunch of pains in the asses, right? Things you've got to come up with a solution you couldn't come up with, and there's no easy way to do it, and you kept looking for an easy way. It probably isn't. If you haven't come up with it, you've got a list of these now, you got a whole bunch of lists of pain in the asses, or you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody about, well, the reason we didn't do it is because we have to tell you it should be a change and you know there's going to be a pushback, but you got to get it done. I like the word closeout. The other reason I like the word closeout is because punch out implies it's an ongoing, you're in a ring and you're going to punch out until somebody, maybe the client just is like, I give up, it's good enough. You told us you were done and we moved in 6 weeks ago and you've been coming back twice a week, and every time you come back I have to make sure I'm not in my bathrobe, and I have to clean up because I don't want to be embarrassed, or at the end of the day I come home and there's dust. I'm sick of it. Let's just call it done. And that's not done. That's not successful completion. Larissa found this appropriate Michael Jordan last dance photo. Here he is. That's closeout, winning basket. You're done. Game over. In closing, project management is also coaching. It's coaching the entire team. It's coaching your design partners. It's coaching your client. It's coaching all of your team members. And it's game day, man. Once you got that project, when somebody said, okay, here we go, start on this date, we got a contract, we got a budget, it's yours, man. You're the coach. You will need assistant coaches, and you will need to lean on other people. but you're the man. Get it done. In closing, have those assistant coaches. Reach out to them. Lean on them. Use the help. Do your job, right? And do not abdicate those responsibilities. You are the project manager. You are responsible. If it seems like the architect is taking control of those meetings and wants to run the agenda and starts kind of taking, don't give up. Hey, say, hey, stop. I get it, guys. I know you got things you want to talk about. My responsibility is this. Do not let that be taken away from you. It can't be taken away from you. You can only abdicate, right? It's up to you. Do not let it go. Hold on to it, manage that project. Okay, guys, I know we moved through really fast. Some of this may have been very redundant for you. Some of you may have better ways of doing it. This is the way I think about project management. It's a holistic approach to looking at that job from start to finish and actively doing everything you can throughout the project to reach that successful completion. It's not project watching, it's not project observing, it's not project crisis management, it's project management. So I'll thank you all for giving me an hour of your time. Scott, I'm going to hand this off to you.
Yeah, Bob, that was great. Thank you very much. We'll get your slide deck and share it with everybody. And also, as mentioned, this has been recorded. We have if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask Bob, you can feel free to unmute your phone real quick and give it a go. I'll shut up now, and if you have a question, go right ahead.
Not everybody at once now. Okay, that's great. Go ahead.
This is Greg Sarkeesian. Bob, how you doing?
Good, Greg. How you doing? Good to see you.
Thanks. I wanted to ask a question, whether you had ever heard of an expression called RACI, which is R-A-C as in Charlie, I, and it stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
I like it. Yeah, I haven't, but I like it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I used it when I was working in telecom doing network development, and it basically helps people understand the community of people who are involved in a project, from the people who are responsible for getting something done, there are people who are accountable for the things that are getting done, but not necessarily directly responsible for doing them, people who are consulted in order to provide information and input for getting the project done, but are not being directly held responsible or accountable. They're just consulted with. And then people who are just kept informed. And oftentimes we found that most of the project players consisted of the first three letters. We very rarely had people in our meetings, for example, who were there as informed persons. It was always either responsible parties, accountable parties, or parties who were consulting with us. So I was just curious if you had heard it in the context of residential construction.
Yeah, I haven't. I've heard other things similar, and I think it's a great thing to think about. Yeah, I think you're right. On most of our projects, everybody is responsible, right? The homeowner is responsible to making decisions and not changing their mind, or changing their mind in a timely way. And the architect, of course, is responsible. So with many things, but our teams are unique, and I think there's a lot that goes across that spectrum. Yep.
And in the telecom construction context, it helped to keep a meeting from turning into one where everybody's beating everybody else up. Essentially saying, well, why didn't you do it? Well, why didn't you do it? Well, why didn't the other guy do it? So knowing what their roles are in that racy context helps people understand what the expectations are and from whom.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay. A question just came across on chat asking about scheduling software. We use Microsoft Project. It's a very robust project scheduler. They use it, Fortune 500 companies use it to run projects. We probably use about 10% or 15% of its capability of what it can actually do. And quite frankly, that's about as much as we can handle. But it's very effective. It almost looks like a spreadsheet, almost looks like an Excel document. And it's as simple as writing down the tasks, and then there's 2 columns to put in a start date, and then you can either put in a finish date, and it'll tell you how many days, or you can put in a start date and how many days you think it should take to accomplish that task, and it'll put the finish date in there for you. And then you can go to the next item on your list, and if the start date can't be before that previous item is finished, you can just click on a button that says dependent, and put the number of the task before it, and it'll give you the start date as the day that other one finished. And then you can put in how many days that particular task should take. And then for the next item, again, you can assign a dependency to it. Which task does it have to follow? In doing that, what Project does really well is as you make changes to your schedule, it'll tick, 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 it'll follow down and change the rest of your schedule for you. So I recommend it. It's a little pricey, and there may be other schedulers out there we're not aware of, but because we're so ensconced in that program now, it makes a lot of sense for us. Sure. You know, that's the other thing. You can always reach out after this. Anytime you want to reach out to me if you have any specific questions about anything we talked about, by all means, reach out, let me know, and always happy to chat and learn something from you as well. So, all right.
As always, Bob, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for participating. Those of you that are getting the CEUs, look for a message from me coming through Constant Contact. It'll be a confirmation survey, just asking you 6 or 7 questions pertaining to this event, and then we'll send you your certificates. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Good job.